All right, so thank you everyone for attending our presentation on navigating disruptive situations with a culture of care. I'm James Bond. I'm also a big stand-up comedy fan, and I kind of feel like we're going on after George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, whoever your favorite comedian is. Dr. Newt always has a lot of energy and great presentation, so I'm going to do my best. Just bear with me. While I will share some of my background shortly, I kind of wanted to just share some context as to why Andre and I thought this was a timely presentation. You know, as our political season heats up, so do our discussion boards. Now, I know our topics may range subject matter by courses, but our students, and dare I say, our faculty and staff, as this political season kind of heats up, as the messages become more and more extreme, we're just inundated with messages, and it can make communication a little more different. We have to work harder to be understood. I know personally and professionally, whether it's in the classroom, nonprofit spaces, or even at home with family, it takes a lot more work to be understood. So I hope our participants find through our presentation today some tools, maybe some approaches and allies that will help reduce the impact of this political season in our classrooms. So now my partner Andre in this presentation will explain our agenda. Next slide, please.
Thank you, James. Okay, so today we're going to walk through a couple different scenarios of student interactions in a course. And then we're going to ask you to share any comments, any experiences that you may have had that are similar, or even something that is totally different. We really want this to be an atmosphere where we share our ideas and learn from one another. You are welcome to unmute your mic and share your ideas with us, either on or off camera, or you can leave any questions or comments in the chat. Next slide, please. So now for the introductions. Hello, everybody. I'm Andre Dodson. I work on the faculty affairs team. This is my fourth year here at UAGC, but I've been in education for, it's been close to 30 years now, with most of that experience either being in the classroom as an instructor or in the faculty development side. You've already met James, but before I hand it back to him to get us started, I want to take a moment to let you know how happy I am that I had the opportunity to collaborate with James on this presentation. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience that I continue to learn and grow from. So for real, James, from me to you, man, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andre, and please know that's reciprocated. A little about my background. I started my higher education career after 8 years in the Army. I served as a student activities advisor for 10 years in the community college system while I pursued my undergraduate and graduate degree. Currently, I serve as an assistant professor here at UAGC in our School of General Studies. My background really ties me to this topic because, you know, after I got my graduate degree, I went on to open veteran centers in 3 different schools. And being the face of veterans, I always served on the BIT team at each of the schools. I've been at 4 different institutions I've been in. Also, that 10 years where I was working as a student activities advisor, that role was overseeing our clubs and organizations. We had over 40 clubs and organizations, their spaces and their activities. And a lot of times these clubs, their topics or area of interest were often opposing each other. And so they're sharing spaces, they're sharing finances, kind of helping them navigate that, helped me build a lot of skills when it comes to de-escalating situations and helping each other share their viewpoints. Now, I also, during that 10 years, one of my responsibilities was training our student government and elected student officials to serve on shared governance. And so they would be taking the students' viewpoints. Our president had a position on our governing board. So really being able to communicate clearly and help one another grow was a very important skill to impart on those students. So with that in mind, I'd like you to take a minute and explore the scenario with me. As Andre said, please feel free to come, to show yourself or come off mute and share what you're thinking. So if I could have the next slide, please. Okay, so this is our first scenario. Let me widen this a bit. And as you see, so this is a critical thinking and global issues class. We have a student who has some cemented beliefs around race, religion, and social issues. The student consistently challenges other students on their views. They're using statistics and other sources. The dialogue is very to the point and questions the validity of other students' arguments, specifically those students that disagree with his position or her position. Students in the class have begun supporting one another against this student's posts, which they feel are inappropriate. And a student has reached out to the instructor saying that they don't feel safe posting their views. So if anybody wants to kind of chime in and share some of the approaches you might take in this situation, some issues that you might think that are playing out here. And I'd also like you to think about if you would have a different response if this student's viewpoints aligned with yours than if they oppose yours. So let's open up the floor and get some opinions from our audience here.
I can speak if unless we have people showing up in the chat room or anything like that. I think that for me, it doesn't sound like there's any. I'm Dan Augusto, by the way, one of the co-facilitators here. It doesn't sound like the student is necessarily doing anything wrong with with the arguments they're making, as much as maybe the personal interactions are not where what could be, to that. And so I think maybe that might be and it sounds like maybe the other students might even be able to learn from this student in terms of how what they're presenting, as opposed to how. So maybe it's one side can learn about what argument to make or how to form your argument, and the other side can learn about how to present the argument. So that's just kind of where my mind goes.
Great point, Dan. Hi, Haley.
Hey, I'd like to jump in and just comment on the students' expression of feeling safe posting their views. And this is an opportunity for an instructor to perhaps jump in and explore that, not from a psychological, approach or a counseling approach, but just to learn more about why they don't feel safe posting their views. And that may allow the instructor to provide some supportive and engaging techniques that they could use within the discussion forum. It can be challenging in a situation when presented with facts that perhaps you weren't aware of or that are not in alignment with your views. But we persist nonetheless, and we learn from those scenarios.
Great point.
I think another question, Haley, is when you say don't feel safe, what do we mean? Do we mean you don't feel safe because they're verbally gonna kind of, you're not gonna be able to just say your opinion and have it considered by people, or do we literally mean I don't feel safe? You know what I mean? That's probably super important to clarify with the student too.
Yes. Anybody else?
I will jump in. Haley, I was thinking the exact same thing as you and Dan. I would want to understand the definition of unsafe and how that's manifesting for the student. But I also want to note Allie's comment in the chat about tone, which I think is important. I would disagree though about students not being supposed to critique each other. I would offer that can be a very productive part of the discussion process. It's critiquing each other's thinking. So I think to your point about tone, the key is in how we do that. And I would say outside of, individual conversations with students, which might be necessary within the discussion forum, as a faculty member, I would attempt to model the most effective critique approach, by asking students to explain themselves in maybe a little bit more detail, ask for examples, ask them to define their terms, and things like that. Maybe you could help the critique be productive versus off-putting.
Great suggestions. So let me give a little more context and share some thoughts. Now, one thing, this is a real scenario that happened, and this student's views really conflicted with the professor's views, and the professor really made that clear, and it kind of hardened both parties in this situation. It made it such that when our bit team looked at the information, when somebody from outside looked at the information, there was no name calling. The student was bringing facts that he felt were relevant to all the discussions. And, my honest opinion, when I looked down everything, I just felt this student had more access to information, had more academic experience than the other students in the class. And because his views were so opposing to the mainstream, it made it easy to kind of other him. And even when we mentioned that the other students began supporting one another against this student, they weren't supporting one another with information only, like name calling got involved, and it really went outside of, it went off the rails. That was something that was a teachable moment. This class, because of the subject matter, there's going to be a lot of disagreement. There's going to be a lot of discourse, but learning to handle that in a respectful, professional way is really important. I believe Dan mentioned, why does the student not feel safe? And this is one of the things that I think really should have been explored with the student that said that. And I think had that student been helped on presenting their argument, finding other resources for their argument, it would have made them a stronger scholar. Whereas it was more about protecting that student, and the student with the strong, the strong opinions, all of that, they were asked to change their tone, to change the way they were presenting things. But they were honestly just presenting information. There was no name calling. There was nothing outside of the subject matter. So looking at that is kind of important. Now, one thing that I regularly do when I'm in this situation, and especially if I feel any kind of way about something that a student is saying, I have so many allies at the school, people that I've worked with on workshops. Now Andre is a new resource for me. And I think we need to have colleagues that we respect, that we know views are a little different than ours. I have those people, and I'll go to them and ask, hey, what do you think about this? What does this say to you? This is kind of how I'm feeling. And sometimes just taking that step back, getting some other eyes, use your faculty consultant. Like there are people here that can help you put things in context and really make sure that you're working in a way to support the scholarship of our students. And I think that's really important. I know right now, a lot of us are getting messages, whether we know it or not. It makes it easy to other people and to assume we understand a lot of things based on whether it's trigger words or things that our students are involved in, or even our colleagues. And so, I think that's a very important technique to utilize. Just keep the lines of communication open with your colleagues. bring some other people in when you feel that that's necessary. Having a conversation with both of these students outside of the discussion board, you will often find that maybe it's not even the subject matter. It may be something that's going on in that student's life that if you reach out in a curious fashion, try to understand. We have a lot of resources at the university that you may learn of a situation that's going on that we can get that student some support for, that will help them kind of let go of some of the stress that they're feeling. The student advocates are a great resource for our students. We have a lot of students that are going through hardship for various reasons. I'm going to share at the end of this announcement that you can use for both our student advocates, but also access and wellness. Access to whether students might need accommodations based on a medical issue. There's a host of things that can go on. And so it's important that we're aware of our resources, that I said I spent 10 years at a community college. I'm really used to conversations with our students. And one thing that I noticed is students that might rub me the wrong way initially, or I rub them the wrong way for whatever reason, when we go on a retreat up in the mountains, or we're working together on whether it's a bake sale or some outside activity, you get to see your students more holistically. And sometimes even these phone calls, as a student advocate, when I talk to a student, like, you might read the situation, a complaint about this student, but once you really start talking and see what's going on, you get a broader opinion, and you can, I think, more effectively reach that student and get some of the results we're looking for. So before we go to Andre's scenario, I want to take, during my research for this, one of the things that I found really helpful that I'll share at the end is an article on restorative practice. This quote is from Jamila Dugan. And what she says is, community members don't share their stories to be heard or saved. They really want to be listened to. And sometimes in that listening, we really get to learn what's going on with our students. We can connect with them better, and we can support them better. So that's all I have for you on this scenario. Next slide.
Can I make one comment?
Yes,
please.
Yeah. So as a former adjunct, what I would usually do is let the students create the expectations or the rules of the class, so that there's initial buy-in and you're establishing the atmosphere or the environment for students to all feel like they can participate. And that allows students also to hold each other accountable from that peer level versus me as the instructor having the rules in place.
Thank you so much, Professor Fitz. That's a great suggestion. All right, next slide, and we can get to Andre.
Okay, there's a few more comments coming in the chat, but they're really going to be able to fit both scenarios, some of the things we're talking about here. So scenario 2 is just a little bit different. This is one where the student is getting more and more frustrated quickly in the first few discussion boards. So first, the student discussion posts express negative opinion towards a previous instructor or a previous class experience. Then next, the student begins to criticize the course content and the discussion prompts, questioning discussion boards as a whole, I've seen before. And also, the student then becomes critical of the instructor's replies and the other students' discussion posts. So, the question here, what I wanted to get to in this one is that a student is beginning to escalate. And I wanted to talk about some de-escalation attempts that could be, that you've had, that you've experienced, that you could share with everybody. Have you ever navigated a situation like this? Have you handled a situation similar to this? And we all learn from every scenario. So have you ever tried something that didn't work in a situation like this? And I think one of the first comments I saw in the chat, Ali had mentioned maybe a conversation about tone in that last scenario. And I'd like to circle in with Ali on, I think it's a very, very valid point. I'd like to circle in on that conversation. How would you present that conversation? When would you present that conversation? How would it look like as you reached out to discuss this with the student? Teresa, loots of things, love it. Share a few with us.
I think too, with students in tone, if you come at it from the viewpoint of you have great ideas, but if you want people to engage and listen to your ideas, you need to present it in a way that they feel comfortable broaching a topic that they might not be an expert in. You know, if someone comes at me with a harsh tone about something I don't feel I'm an expert in, I won't even engage because I'm already, I already feel like I'm down 2 notches. But if someone presents an idea in an open way, using a tone that's like, hey, this is what I think about this, that makes me much more likely to engage. And so not telling the student they're wrong with their tone obviously wouldn't be the approach, but it's more like if you want to engage others and maybe have them understand your thinking more, it'd be better to go about it in an open and inviting tone rather than kind of a this is right, I know this is this, because where there's no room for an outside opinion to even enter into the conversation.
Awesome, great advice, Ali. Thank you very much for that. So on this slide, really what we have are a few interventions that, to be honest with you, and the things that have been mentioned in the chat and the things we've been talking about, I can see it's going down this direction. I mean, the de-escalation just spoke about, Ali just spoke about there, reaching out to the student and attempting to find a positive resolution, trying to identify what is the root cause. And I think somebody here had said or put it in the chat about being naturally curious about what's driving, especially, in that second scenario, there was some negative content, some negative experiences. To me, there was a bit of negativity there that I'm just curious about where it comes from, and how we can find a positive solution. I think one of the key ones here that I really wanted to dig into was the caring outreach. And I can hear that's a thread no matter what the scenario is modeling caring, professional, and respectful communication with the student, and going hand in hand with that, I guess I'm going to say, it being naturally curious. You know what, my mom used to call me nosy when I was a kid, but I am naturally curious about pretty much everything. So, it comes easy. But in this scenario, sometimes you need to take a step back and breathe and think these things through. And then, as James is going to show us some of the resources that he's brought, some of the great resources he's brought, providing pathways for the appropriate resources and support if a student does say something, if a student does give an indication that there's something going on outside the classroom that is causing an issue. You mentioned it, we do have lots of support, and we have a huge network of support. And then, as it gets down into, after you're able to connect with the student and create that caring outreach, there's going to be the opportunity here where you're going to need, you can set the expectations for what the appropriate behavior is going to look like in the classroom or in the discussion boards. And there's even a point that where you can let the student know the consequences for non-compliance if it doesn't occur. And then of course, as we move forward with the process, there's steps in every process before we start submitting a report of concern or anything. Then you want to document your de-escalation attempts, and have all your documentation ready in case there is another step. We need to get another team involved in this. But I am, oh wow, I see, sorry, I missed the chat there. I see some things in the chat. I know we have a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge in this room that have dealt with some issues like this. Here I am being nosy again. Mama, stop it. But I am super curious about some things that you have experienced and some things you tried that worked, and even the things you tried that did not.
I would also like to add, yes, being curious about our students is very important. I do think it's also important that we make connections with one another. Recently I had a personal development opportunity to revisit my teaching philosophy. And one of the really important things to me is helping our students tie the information that they're learning to their lives for their benefit. And I have so many colleagues here that help me see things in different ways that I know are much more impactful in that because of my relationships here. I've been an adjunct faculty member here. I know how difficult it can be to feel part of the university, but participating in things like this, whether it's faculty, community, or practice, various work groups, getting to know your peers and letting them get to know you is how we become allies for one another. It's how we have someone to go to when we're having these issues. So I really hope that you take that to heart. I hope you get a chance to explore your teaching philosophy. It's a great professional development opportunity. We have to do one with each class anyway. So I really hope you'll explore that. And I think we can take questions till the end here.
I think we're running up on time, but I dropped a link in the chat there, and thank you, Justin. I see we were headed the same direction there. You know, I put a resource in the chat. It's a link to a resource that we provide for the faculty here at UAGC. It's actually a link to Faculty Help, which is a bank of resources to help our faculty navigate questions that may come up along the way. So this specific resource is to our student support resource guide. It gives it's something our faculty can use to consult when navigating any kind of challenging or any kind of situations. There are scenarios. There's a lot of information in there. Please take a look at that resource I put in the chat and the ones that Stephanie put in for James as well.
That was excellent. Thanks so much, you two. Great expertise, a really vibrant discussion in the chat as well. Obviously, this is something that is needed and worthy of discussion. And just for the audience, we coined the phrase Andre the de-escalator the other day in our practice session. So great resources there. Thought I'd throw that in there. But thanks so much, you two. Really great stuff. And thanks to all the attendees for being here. The keynote with Matt Tenney, the first one is coming up here in the next few minutes, and Dan put that in the chat. So hope to see everybody over there, and have a great rest of your Culture of Care Summit.
Thank you all for the wonderful conversation. I appreciate everything, guys. Thank you.